Research Director for the American Economic Liberties Project, Matt Stoller, joins us now to talk about that landmark decision in the Facebook case. Good to see you, Matt. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we had this big court decision. Let's put this up there on the screen. It broke on CNBC yesterday. District Court, who is throwing out the FTC and state antitrust complaints against Facebook. Facebook stock, Matt, afterwards climbed a collective is worth now $1 trillion after the U.S. court's dismissal of these antitrust lawsuits. And it was an Obama-appointed judge who made this decision in the first place. Lay out for us exactly what happened here. Is this the end of the antitrust suit against Facebook? Does the government, do the state attorneys generals, do they have the ability to appeal this? And then what does this generally say about the legal legacy that a lot of establishment liberalism has left us on this?
Yeah, no, it's like $1 trillion. It's like nicely poetic, because usually stocks like react, but it's not usually like that fun a number.
Right.
So the last week Congress was debating. There's a context here. Last week Congress debated, and actually the Judiciary Committee passed a bunch of laws, some to strengthen general purpose antitrust laws, some to actually take on big tech directly. And all the bills passed, just the committee. But there's this debate in Congress about whether our laws are strong enough to deal with the tech firms writ broadly, but also monopolies more generally. And the big problem that we have is the main one, it's not the only one, is that the judiciary, like judges, are super deferential to monopolists. And so there's this big controversy last week in Congress. And then today, and a bunch of people are like, the laws are fine. And then yesterday, a judge dismisses these cases, these antitrust cases against Facebook. And big headlines, it's sort of from, I'm an anti-monopolist, but it's not as bad as it seems. The headlines are kind of worse because there are two cases, and the judge said one of the cases can be refiled. The other one is done, right? So one case is a set of state attorneys general. He dismissed that entirely. They have to appeal. They can't refile for weird bureaucratic reasons that are problematic, can be fixed by Congress. That's a problem. He basically said they waited too long. And because of bureaucratic reasons, state AGs are not considered part of government when they bring an antitrust case. They're considered private plaintiffs. It's weird and dumb, and they should fix it. But that case is kind of done. They can appeal it, but it's a very narrow bureaucratic appeal. The other one, which is the Federal Trade Commission, they are trying to undo mergers. They have two basic claims. They're saying Facebook bought WhatsApp, they bought Instagram, and those were to its monopoly. They also marketed an open platform and said, come build on our platform. And then they killed apps like Vine or others who they perceived of as competitors. And the FTC said that that's a violation of anti-monopoly laws. And the judge said that the merger claim can go forward. They can go after the acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp, but the other ones can't. But then he dismissed the whole complaint because he said, well, the FTC didn't prove that Facebook had monopoly power. However, they can refile it in 30 days. So it's a kind of bureaucratic judge who's a little bit of a snob saying to the FTC, I buy a lot of your complaint, but I don't like how you wrote it. I think you were a little lazy and you got to show me some respect. So write it again and submit it again. And also this one particular complaint about Zuckerberg crushing people. Zuckerberg is allowed to crush anyone who wants. He wants. That's how the law works. And so I'm not going to allow that to go forward. So that's where we are. And it shows a lot about how screwed up our legal system is, that judges are so deferential to monopoly power.
Yeah.
But it's not the end of the road here. It's kind of a better headline for Facebook than it actually is in practice.
Interesting. So yeah, just to bolster what you were saying there, part of what the judge wrote is that the FTC's complaint says almost nothing concrete on the key question of how much power Facebook actually had and still has in a properly defined antitrust product market. It is almost as if the agency expects the court to simply nod to the conventional wisdom that Facebook is a monopolist. Do you think that there was any truth to the claim that the FTC basically didn't do an effective job of really making the case that Facebook is a monopolist here? As the judge is saying, basically like, y'all just assumed that I was going to think that they were monopolists, but you didn't really prove their case. Do you think that that argument from the judge had merit?
It's Facebook. Like, come on. I mean, the judge basically wrote that. He's like, yeah, it's Facebook. Everybody knows it's a monopolist, but you have to be more evidence. And you could make one of two claims about it. Or one is that the FTC had a lot of information about the market structure, including market shares. They could have said, Facebook is sticking more ads in the news feed, which is a degradation of product quality. They're doing a lot of things that indicate that they have market power. And they didn't do that. And they didn't do it for strategic reasons. They wanted to hold back because later on in the trial, they want to present this evidence and they don't necessarily want to give that away, what their whole strategy is. Or you could say they didn't do a particularly good job they just sort of were bad at what they do. They don't really know how to litigate one of these. Either one is sort of a legitimate viewpoint. But the judge, the broad issue here is that this is a motion to dismiss, which means it's not even the trial. It's just a question of whether the judge says under any plausible scenario, a jury might rule for the government. And he's like, no, there's no way that the jury would ever, with this complaint, even rule against the government. So it's kind of an insane decision from a judge. And I mean, the FTC should have seen this coming. They should have done a better job. But the law, it really should be fine to bring a case and say, look at Facebook. They're Facebook, right? They're clearly a monopoly. I want to, and they're doing these things. I should get a trial. You don't necessarily win the trial, but you should get a trial. That's how the law should work. And so it's a crazy decision. The FTC also kind of is bad at what they do, but Facebook, made better arguments. But we're at the dismissal stage, so that should require a much lower standard of proof.
Gotcha.
Makes sense. And so, Matt, just generally in the future, like you're saying, it's not as good for Facebook as some people might say. What are the developments in the congressional and then the FTC front? Like you said, they're going to have to refile. That's one thing that can happen here. Is there promising action on the federal level, which seems to be most promising at this time?
Yeah. So just to bring a broader context here. So the claims that the government made about Mark Zuckerberg crushing rivals and doing things to maintain his monopoly, this is not just about Facebook. This kind of behavior happens in every industry you can think of. It is why insulin prices are so high. It is why, in many cases, it's really hard to find the best airline price. It is why you see high prices and lower wages across the board in virtually every industry that you can think of, from peanut butter to hospitals to mail sorting software, whatever it is. This is why. It's because judges rule this way. And we're seeing it on Facebook, right? This is how the law applies in this particular case. But, imagine if people weren't paying attention, how deferential a judge would be. But going forward, to your question, what is likely to happen is that you're going to see more action. I mean, one of the nice things about this is you're going to see more action in Congress because Congress is paying attention and they're saying, wait a second, there are these antitrust laws we have on the books. How is it that a judge, and an Obama judge, so this isn't like the Democrats aren't going to be like, oh, this is an evil Trump judge, which is silly. But, it's a judge who just said, I'm not going to really buy that Facebook is a monopoly. And so this adds a lot of fuel to the fire. And people in Congress who want to change the antitrust laws, who want to say, let's make this stricter. Let's take away discretion from judges in making these kinds of claims. And that's what I think the big takeaway is here. I think in 30 days, you're going to see the FTC bring a different, more sophisticated set of claims, and then we'll move on from there.
Matt, the last question I have for you is some make the case that social media companies are basically natural monopolies, right? They're sort of similar to public utilities. Like, obviously, the value of a social media company is that everybody's there. And so this creates a sort of natural monopoly situation. Do you think that that is, in fact, the case? And what would the policy implications of that ultimately be?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've had these kinds of network systems before, everything from railroads to telegraphs to the phone system in AT&T. I think it's sort of an open question whether these are kind of quote unquote natural monopolies. AOL Instant Messenger could have made the same claim, and then in 2000, the FCC, as part of the AOL Time Warner merger, said you have to open up your system to rivals, and then a bunch of rival instant messengers clients got in and started to open up and make that a competitive market. It's really clear there are network effects here. There are economies of scale, but the internet has network effects and economies of scale. There's nothing that says that network effects and economies of scale have to be contained by a corporation. Like email has network effects and economies of scale, and no one owns that. But it is possible that some of these systems have to be contained within a corporate entity. I'm not sure about social networking. If that's the case, though, and maybe even if it's not the case, then the traditional American remedy to that is public utility law. So that would be the government saying, here are the prices you can charge in terms that you can set. That would be privacy, or it would be, how you can amplify or whatever. And then, you have usually non-discriminatory treatment of all comers onto the platform. Basically, if it's an important social institution, as the railroads were, as the telegraphs were, as the telephone was, as the internet is, then the government sets the terms and conditions. We, the people, set the terms and conditions so that everybody gets equal access to this vital social resource. I'm not totally convinced that it's a natural monopoly, but if it is, or if there are network effects that you can't get away from without having a corporate structure overlaid, then we have rules, we have ways of dealing with that, and we should just sort of bring them back. They're pre-1970 rules, but they work.
Yeah.
That's a really smart point. Really appreciate you joining us, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Great to see you, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks for everybody watching. We really appreciate it. If you guys want to support our work here, you can support us at Become a Breaking Points Premium member. You get to watch the entire show uncut, completely 1 hour early. Listen to it uncut as well. We would really appreciate it. Yesterday, we saw exactly how dicey it can be discussing ivermectin and all of that. And it really is a relief watching people get demonetized or taken off of YouTube and more, to know that is not going to ever factor into our editorial decisions. So we appreciate all of those of you who are showing up for us, and we will see you all on Thursday.
Very quickly,
yes.
I want to say to our lifetime members who we are in love with and so grateful to, we are working on the plaques.
Yes.
There's a few more of you than
some of them are here.
Initially expected. So we're figuring out a solution so that we can make sure your name is a permanent part of this set, which is something we are really excited about and very committed to. So just know we are actively working on it. We're also going to get the list of names that runs at the end. We're getting that updated as well, so that all of you will get your due, because we are truly, truly grateful.
That's right. I don't want any of you to feel left out. The plaques are here. They're pretty big, and we spent a lot of time this morning being like, man, we're going to put these things.
Good problem.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out, because we love all of you. Same thing with the credit section. It's a little bit harder to update than you guys might expect, but everything should be absolutely good to go and 100% updated by Thursday's show. If it's not, go ahead and hit the customer service email. We'll get back to you and make sure that everything is completely set. And if you want to become one, look, we'd be eternally grateful. As we said, you guys get your name inscribed literally on a plaque, which is on the set and in the credit section for life, reserve, VIP, all that stuff. The pitch is all there on the website. The link is right there on the description notes. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll see you on Thursday.
See you guys Thursday. Have a good one. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.